I welcome you to my channel. Subscribe and listen to my new stories every day. It was a Thursday night like any other. The kids were in bed, the dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen, and the smell of Carrie's perfume still lingered in the living room. She was sitting next to me on the couch, her eyes half glued to some crime drama on TV while I scrolled mindlessly through my phone. It was a scene we had lived 1,000 times, in the 10 years we'd been married, comfortable, familiar. But that night, something shifted. Carrie's phone was on the coffee table, face up like usual. I wasn't paying much attention until the screen lit up. Out of habit, my eyes flicked to it, and I caught a glimpse of the message before it disappeared. I almost wish I hadn't seen it. Maybe I'd still be living in blissful ignorance. But there it was, as clear as day: miss you, babe. Can't wait for tomorrow night. It wasn't my number. For a moment, I didn't move. It felt like the world around me had come to a grinding halt. Carrie didn't seem to notice. She was laughing softly at something the detective on TV said, her hand absently brushing the hair out of her face. I glanced back at her phone, now dark again, as if the message had never existed. My heart pounded in my chest. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head, each one more painful than the last. There had to be an explanation, right? Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe it was some stupid joke from a coworker. Maybe, but I knew. I knew deep down that it wasn't a mistake. This was real. And my life, the life I thought was so stable and secure, had just been torn apart by a simple text message. I wanted to ask her right then. I wanted to grab her phone, show her the message, demand answers. But I didn't. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, and my mind was a blur of emotions I couldn't even begin to sort through. Instead, I sat there, frozen, watching the minutes tick by while my wife, my faithful wife, laughed at some TV show, blissfully unaware that I had just seen through the cracks in our perfect little world. The show ended, and she yawned, stretching her arms above her head. "I'm heading to bed," she said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek before disappearing down the hallway. I barely managed to mumble goodnight, my mind still reeling from what I'd seen. When I was sure she was asleep, I made my way to the kitchen. I sat at the table, my hands trembling as I pulled up the phone bill. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to know. But some part of me, the part that couldn't stand being left in the dark, pushed me forward. The bill loaded slowly, each second dragging like an eternity, and then there it was, an unfamiliar number, repeated over and over again, all hours of the day and night. I scrolled back through the months. The calls and texts had been going on for a long time, longer than I cared to admit. I felt sick. My stomach churned, and my hands gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. This was it, then. This was the truth. My wife, the woman I had built my life around, was seeing someone else. There was no other explanation. The texts, the late nights at work, the sudden gym routine, it all made sense now. How had I been so blind? I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I wasn't ready. I needed more. I needed proof, something undeniable. So, I made a plan. The next morning, while Carrie was in the shower, I called in sick to work. My mind was racing, but I kept my voice steady, telling my boss I was feeling under the weather and wouldn't be coming in. Carrie didn't ask any questions, she barely noticed as she rushed out the door, late for her shift at the hospital. As soon as she left, I got to work. I had a friend, Mike, who worked as a private investigator. We hadn't spoken in years, but I dug out his number and gave him a call. He picked up on the second ring, his voice as gruff as I remembered. "Adam? Long time, man. What's going on?" I hesitated for a moment. Saying it out loud felt like admitting defeat. "Mike," I started, my voice low, "I need your help. I think Carrie's cheating on me." There was a long pause on the other end. When Mike spoke again, his tone had changed, all business now. You sure about this? I found texts, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And there's a number on the phone bill. She's been talking to someone, a lot. All right, he said, I'll take care of it. Give me the number, and I'll run a background check. We'll see what comes up. In the meantime, I'll follow her. If she's meeting someone, I'll find out. I gave him the number, my hands shaking as I rattled it off. It felt surreal, like I was talking about someone else's life. Not mine. Not my marriage. The next few days passed in a haze. Carrie went about her routine as if nothing had changed. She worked her shifts, came home, kissed the kids goodnight, and went to bed. I played along, pretending that I didn't know. But every time she looked at her phone, every time she smiled at some message, my blood boiled. I wanted to confront her, to scream at her for what she was doing, but I held back. I needed proof. And Mike didn't disappoint. 3 days later, he called me. Adam, I've got something for you, he said, his voice heavy. It's not good. I swallowed hard. What did you find? She's been seeing a guy named Jake. He's a doctor at the hospital. They've been meeting up for weeks, maybe longer. I've got photos, if you need them. My heart sank. Jake. I remembered her mentioning him in passing a few times, always casually, like he wasn't important. But now it was clear, he was the one. The man she had been sneaking around with while I was at home, taking care of our kids, believing we had a perfect life. Send me everything, I said, my voice cold. I want all of it. The pictures arrived later that night. I opened the email, my hands trembling as I clicked through each one. There she was, my wife, holding hands with another man, laughing with him, kissing him. It was all right there in front of me, undeniable proof that she had betrayed me. I should have felt angry, but all I felt was numb. The life I thought I had was gone, replaced by this cold, bitter truth. I stared at the photos for what felt like hours, the weight of them pressing down on me like a boulder. There was no going back now. Carrie had made her choice, and I would make mine. The next morning, I packed her bags. She didn't say much when she came home that night. She never suspected anything, not until she saw her suitcases by the door. I was sitting in the living room, waiting for her. Adam, she said, her voice hesitant. What's going on? I stood up, holding the photos in my hand. I know, Carrie. I know about Jake. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then the excuses started. It's not what you think, she said, her voice trembling. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I shook my head. It meant enough for you to keep doing it. 4 months. Tears welled up in her eyes. Adam, please. It's over. I'll end it. I love you. I don't want to lose you. But I was done. You already lost me the moment you betrayed me, I said, my voice cold and steady. Get out. She didn't argue after that. She picked up her bags and left. And just like that, my life as I knew it was over. Carrie left that night without another word. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed through the house, and for the first time in 10 years, the silence felt unbearable. I sat in the living room for what felt like hours, the weight of everything crashing down on me all at once. The pictures of her with Jake were still open on my laptop, staring back at me like some cruel reminder of how blind I had been. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break something. But instead, I just sat there, numb. My mind kept replaying the same question over and over again: how did we get here? I thought we had everything, a good life, 2 amazing kids, and a marriage that could withstand anything. But I was wrong. I had been living in a fantasy, and now that fantasy had shattered. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. I had no idea where Carrie had gone, and to be honest, I didn't care. She wasn't my concern anymore. The kids, though, they were upstairs, sound asleep, completely unaware that their world was about to be turned upside down. What was I supposed to tell them? How do you explain to your children that the life they know is gone? That their mother betrayed everything? I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. I'd give it a few days, I told myself. Let things settle. The next morning was brutal. I barely slept, and when I did, my dreams were filled with images of Carrie and Jake, laughing at me, mocking me for being so stupid. When I finally dragged myself out of bed, I had to face the reality of what was coming. The kids would wake up soon, and they'd want to know where their mom was. I had no idea what I was going to tell them, but I couldn't put it off any longer. I made breakfast, the routine of it helping to ground me in the chaos. As I flipped pancakes, Emma, my 13-year-old, came down the stairs, rubbing her eyes. She looked at the empty seat where her mom usually sat, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Where's Mom?" she asked, her voice groggy with sleep. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. She had to leave for a while, I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. She won't be home for a bit. Emma blinked, processing what I had said. Is she okay? She asked, her voice tinged with concern. She's fine, I said quickly. She needs some time. I hated lying to her, but what else could I do? I wasn't ready to dump the whole truth on them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But deep down, I knew the day was coming when I would have to tell them everything. Daniel, my 11-year-old, came downstairs next. He was quieter than Emma, always the more reserved one. He didn't ask any questions about Carrie's absence, just ate his breakfast in silence. I could see the worry in his eyes, though. He wasn't dumb, he knew something was wrong, even if he didn't say it. After they left for school, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chairs. The house felt different now, like a part of it had been ripped away. I was angry at Carrie, furious even, but more than that, I felt hollow. She was gone, and so was the life I thought we had. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Mike, the private investigator. Hey, Adam. You doing okay? His voice was cautious, as if he already knew the answer. No, I said bluntly. Not really. There was a pause on the other end, then he said, listen, I've got more. I wasn't sure if you'd want to know, but Carrie's been seeing this guy for a while. I don't know how long exactly, but from what I've gathered, it's not just some fling. They've been meeting up at his place, sneaking around after her shifts. She's in deep, man. I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening on the phone. How long? I asked, my voice low. Months. At least 6, maybe more, Mike said. I'm sorry, Adam. 6 months. 6 months of lies. 6 months of pretending everything was fine while she was off with another man. The weight of it hit me like a freight train. I had been living a lie for half a year, and I hadn't even known it. Thanks, Mike, I said, my voice hollow. I appreciate you looking into it. If you need anything else, let me know, he said before hanging up. I sat there, letting the anger wash over me. It wasn't just the affair. It was the betrayal, the deception, the way she had taken the life we built and tossed it aside like it meant nothing. She didn't just betray me, she betrayed our family, our kids. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without consequences. I wanted her to feel the pain she had caused me. I wanted her to suffer. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I started making phone calls. First, I called her parents. They adored Carrie, always doting on her, thinking she was the perfect daughter, the perfect wife. I told them everything. I didn't hold back. Her mom was in shock, barely able to speak, while her dad muttered curses under his breath. I could hear the disbelief in their voices, the way they struggled to process what I had just told them. But I didn't care. They needed to know the truth about their precious daughter. Next, I called a few of our mutual friends. Carrie's best friend, Sarah, had been there through every milestone in our lives, our wedding, the birth of our kids, every holiday gathering. I told her everything, too. She cried on the phone, apologizing over and over again, saying she had no idea. But part of me wondered, didn't she? Could she really have been so blind? Or was she just pretending not to know? Each call felt like a small victory, a way to take control of the situation. Carrie thought she could walk away from this unscathed, but I wasn't going to let her. I would make sure everyone knew what she had done. I would burn her world to the ground, just like she had burned mine. The final call I made was to Jake's wife. Her name was Laura, and we had never met, though I had heard Carrie mention her in passing a few times. I found her number through some quick digging online and dialed, my heart pounding in my chest. When she picked up, I introduced myself, keeping my voice calm and measured. "Hi, Laura. My name's Adam. I'm Carrie's husband. I'm calling because I think you should know what's been going on." There was a long pause on the other end, then she said quietly, "What do you mean?" "I think your husband, Jake, and my wife have been seeing each other," I said, laying it out as plainly as I could. "I have proof. Photos, text messages, everything." She didn't say anything for a moment, and I could hear her breathing, slow and shaky. Then, almost in a whisper, she asked, "How long?" "Months," I said, my voice cold. "At least 6. I could hear her trying to keep it together, the sound of her breath hitching as she fought to hold back the tears. "Thank you for telling me," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry," I said, though I didn't really feel sorry. Not for her. Not for Jake. But it felt like the right thing to say. After I hung up, I sat back, feeling an odd sense of satisfaction. I had done what I needed to do. I had set things in motion. Carrie might have thought she could walk away from this without consequences, but she was wrong. The next few days passed in a blur. Carrie didn't call, and I didn't expect her to. She had made her bed, and now she would lie in it. The kids started to ask more questions, but I kept my answers vague, telling them their mom was away for a while and that things would be different for a bit. It wasn't enough to satisfy them, but I wasn't ready for the full conversation yet. Not until I had everything in place. And I was getting there. I had already spoken to a lawyer. The divorce papers would be ready soon, and I planned to serve them to her as publicly as possible. Maybe at work, maybe in front of her friends. Somewhere she wouldn't be able to hide. Somewhere that would humiliate her just as much as she had humiliated me. It was just the beginning. The papers came sooner than I expected. Neatly packed in a manila envelope, they sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking time bomb, waiting for me to make the next move. I had spent the last few days trying to figure out exactly how I was going to serve them to Carrie. Part of me wanted to do it with all the drama and spectacle I could muster, something that would embarrass her, make her feel the shame she had earned. But another part of me, the quieter part, just wanted this over with. The kids were noticing the cracks now. They were no longer satisfied with my vague responses about their mom being away for a while. Emma had started asking more questions, and Daniel was pulling back, retreating into himself like he always did when things got tough. I knew I couldn't keep them in the dark much longer. It wasn't fair to them, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal when the world they knew was falling apart. Carrie, for her part, hadn't tried to reach out much. She sent a few texts, asking how the kids were, saying she missed them, but I kept my responses short and to the point. I wasn't interested in small talk or in playing happy family anymore. She was staying with her sister, that much I knew. And as far as I was concerned, she could stay there indefinitely. I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. Inside were the documents that would sever everything, our marriage, our home, our life together. It was just paper, but it felt like so much more. I couldn't believe I was here, in this place where I had to formally dismantle everything I thought would last forever. But there was no turning back now. I called her that afternoon. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear her voice, but I knew this had to be done. When she picked up, she sounded cautious, like she knew something was coming. "Adam," she said, her voice tentative. "Carrie," I replied, keeping my tone flat. "We need to meet. I have something for you." There was a pause on the other end. She hesitated before responding. "What is it?" "You know what it is," I said, not giving her the satisfaction of playing dumb. "The divorce papers." She didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, I could hear her breathing, slow and uneven. "Adam, do we really have to do this? Can't we talk about it first?" I clenched my jaw. It was amazing how she could still try to pull that card, as if there was anything left to talk about. "There's nothing to discuss," I said coldly. "You made your choice." Another long pause. I could almost picture her on the other end of the line, sitting on her sister's couch, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. But there was nothing left to salvage. "Fine," she said at last, her voice small. "When do you want to meet?" "Tomorrow," I said. "I'll drop them off at the park near the house. You can come by and pick them up." "All right," she agreed quietly. The next day, I drove to the park, the papers sitting on the passenger seat beside me. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that made everything feel heavier than it already was. I parked and sat there for a few minutes, staring at the envelope. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold in front of me. I spotted her car pulling up a few minutes later. She stepped out, wearing a simple sweater and jeans, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked tired, worn down by everything, but I didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. I got out of the car, the envelope in hand, and walked over to her. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions, guilt, sadness, and something that almost resembled hope. "Adam," she started, but I cut her off. "Here." I handed her the envelope, keeping my face impassive. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly as she looked down at the papers. "Do we really have to do this?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, we do," I said firmly. "It's over, Carrie." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment, I thought she might try to plead with me again. But she didn't. Instead, she nodded, biting her lip as she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I never wanted it to end like this," she said softly, her voice breaking. "Neither did I," I replied. "But you made your choices." "I'm sorry, Adam," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm so sorry. Sorry." It was a word I had heard too many times in the last few weeks, and each time it felt more meaningless. Sorry wasn't going to fix this. Sorry wasn't going to undo the months of betrayal or the broken trust. It was just a word, a weak attempt at redemption, and it wasn't enough. "I know," I said quietly, but there was no forgiveness in my voice. "But it doesn't change anything." She wiped at her eyes, sniffling as she held the envelope close to her chest. "I'll sign them," she said finally. "I'll sign them, and I won't fight you on anything. Just, please, let me see the kids." I nodded. "Of course. I'm not going to keep them from you. We'll figure something out." She nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude, though I didn't feel like I had given her much. She turned to leave, but then hesitated, turning back to me. "Adam, she started, but I cut her off again. "Don't," I said firmly. "Don't say anything else. Just go." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly and turned to walk back to her car. I watched her go, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. This was it. The beginning of the end. As she drove away, I stood there for a while, letting the weight of everything sink in. When I got home that evening, I felt lighter somehow. The kids were playing in the living room, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe that things might be okay again. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. Maybe we could find a new kind of normal. A different life, but one where we could still be happy. But as I watched them laugh and play, I knew that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about them, about making sure they were okay, even if I wasn't. I had to protect them from this, from the fallout of Carrie's choices. They didn't deserve to be dragged through the mud of our broken marriage. The next few days passed in a blur. Carrie and I communicated only through text, arranging visits with the kids and trying to figure out a schedule that worked for everyone. It was tense, awkward, but at least it was civil. She signed the papers without argument, and I filed them with the court. The process would take time, but it was moving forward, and that was all I could ask for. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat down at the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey in my hand. I stared out the window into the dark, thinking about everything that had happened. The affair, the lies, the divorce. It was a lot to process, and some days it felt like too much. But other days, like tonight, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't the life I had planned, but maybe it was the life I needed. Maybe, in the end, this would be the thing that set me free. I took a sip of whiskey, letting it burn down my throat, and leaned back in my chair. There was still so much ahead, custody battles, moving on, figuring out how to be a single dad. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could handle it. Like I could rebuild, piece by piece, and come out stronger on the other side. The divorce wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the end of the man I used to be. And maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. Weeks turned into months. Life, in its cruel, methodical way, carried on. The divorce was finalized, and Carrie moved into a small apartment not far from the house. We settled into a new kind of routine, awkward, stilted co-parenting where the kids bounced between two homes. I tried to stay strong for Emma and Daniel. They were the only thing that mattered now, and I told myself that, in time, we'd all heal. But healing didn't come as easily as I thought it would. Carrie and I communicated only when necessary. Our conversations were cold, transactional, just the logistics of pickups and drop-offs. Every now and then, she'd try to make small talk, asking how I was doing, if I was seeing anyone. I gave her nothing. We were strangers now, and that was how it had to be. The kids were struggling, though. No matter how hard I tried to shield them from the pain of the divorce, it seeped in. Emma, once so vibrant and full of life, had become sullen, withdrawn. She barely spoke to me anymore, always locking herself in her room. Daniel was quieter than ever, spending hours on end playing video games, trying to escape into a world that wasn't fractured. I tried my best. I really did. I took them out for ice cream, we went to the park, and I made sure we had game nights every weekend. But something was missing. No matter what I did, there was always an invisible barrier between us, a wall built by the wreckage of our family. And it wasn't just the kids. I was crumbling, too. At first, I thought I was handling it well. The divorce papers had been filed, the drama had been contained, and I was on my way to starting a new life. But as the months dragged on, the weight of it all began to crush me. The loneliness, the guilt, the constant gnawing thought that maybe, just maybe, I could have done something to prevent it. The nights were the worst. After the kids were in bed, the house felt empty. I'd sit in the living room, staring at the TV but not really watching, just trying to fill the silence. I drank more than I should have, drowning myself in whiskey just to numb the ache in my chest. But the more I drank, the worse it got. The pain didn't fade, it festered. Then, one night, everything came crashing down. It was a Friday evening, and I had just picked up Emma and Daniel from Carrie's apartment. They were quiet in the back seat, Daniel with his headphones on and Emma staring out the window, lost in her thoughts. I could feel the tension in the car, thick and suffocating, but I didn't know how to break it. The roads were slick with rain, the windshield wipers working overtime as we made our way home. We pulled into the driveway, and I parked the car. "Come on, guys. Let's get inside," I said, trying to sound upbeat, though my heart wasn't in it. Emma didn't move. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, her face pale and expressionless. "Emma?" I said softly, turning around in my seat. "You okay?" She didn't answer. I opened my door, the rain pounding down as I stepped out and came around to her side. I opened her door and knelt down beside her, my heart racing. "Emma, talk to me. What's going on?" Finally, she turned to look at me, and the emptiness in her eyes nearly broke me. "I don't want to live like this anymore, Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. I froze. A cold chill ran through me, cutting deeper than the rain ever could. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were trembling. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I hate it," she said, her voice cracking. "I hate everything. I hate bouncing between houses. I hate pretending everything's okay when it's not. I hate that you and Mom aren't together anymore. I just want it all to stop." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I had known the divorce was hard on them, but I hadn't realized just how much it was tearing her apart. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "Emma, I'm so sorry," I said, my voice shaking. "I know it's hard. I know it hurts. But I promise, we're going to get through this. I'm here for you. Always." But she just shook her head, pulling her hand away. "It's not enough," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Nothing's ever going to be the same again. It's all broken." Tears filled my eyes as I watched my little girl crumble in front of me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt truly helpless. I had thought I could fix this, that with enough time, we'd all heal and move on. But the truth was staring me in the face: some things couldn't be fixed. Some wounds didn't heal. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as the rain poured down around us. She cried against my chest, her body shaking with sobs, and I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. I had done this. I had let this happen. That night, after I finally got the kids to bed, I sat in the dark, the house eerily silent. I poured myself another drink, though I didn't really want it. I just didn't know what else to do. My phone buzzed on the table, and I glanced at it, expecting another meaningless text. But it wasn't. It was Carrie. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back, "About what?" Her response came almost immediately, "About Emma. I'm worried." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I didn't want to talk to Carrie, didn't want to open that door again. But Emma's broken voice echoed in my mind, and I knew we couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. "Fine," I typed. "Come over tomorrow. We need to figure this out." The next day, Carrie showed up at the house. I hadn't seen her in person since I handed her the divorce papers, and seeing her standing in the doorway stirred up a mess of emotions I wasn't ready to deal with. We sat down at the kitchen table, awkward and tense. She looked tired, her eyes puffy like she hadn't slept in days. "Adam, I don't know what to do anymore," she said quietly. "Emma's not okay. I don't think either of the kids are. We need to do something." "I know," I said, my voice strained. "But what?" "I'm trying, Carrie. I'm doing everything I can, but it's not enough." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I've been thinking, maybe we should try to work things out. For the kids. Maybe if we. No, I said firmly, cutting her off. We're not doing that. We're not getting back together, Carrie. That's not the answer. She blinked, her face falling. But. It's over, I said, my voice cold. What's done is done. We need to focus on helping them move forward, not giving them false hope. She wiped at her eyes, nodding slowly. I hate seeing them like this. Me too, I whispered, looking down at the table. The conversation didn't go anywhere after that. Carrie left, and we agreed to get Emma into therapy. But nothing felt resolved. Nothing felt fixed. The weight of it all still pressed down on me, suffocating me. That night, I sat in Emma's room after she had fallen asleep, watching her breathe softly, her face still stained with the tears from earlier. I had never felt so lost, so broken. As I sat there in the dark, a terrifying thought crept into my mind, maybe none of us would ever be okay again. And maybe I was the one who couldn't save us.